The AI bubble is bigger than you think, and watch till the end to get the full context to have an idea of whether we can really do anything about this or not. Spoiler alert, there's really nothing we can do. Now I got this awesome idea from this gentleman right here, David Dayen. Do apologize if I'm butchering your name. Great article, but really confirmed what I was already thinking. So everyone is worried about AI taking their jobs or Skynet taking over. But the real immediate threat is financial. It is always the bankers. Whenever you think about an issue or a bubble popping, it is always leverage that is causing the popping. Wall Street and Silicon Valley are usually at war, but they have formed a quote unquote suicide pact around AI. It's getting bad. It's not just OpenAI losing money. It's a massive unregulated mountain of debt called private credit, aka shadow banking, rebranded to sound boring. Assets in private credit hit 1.6 trillion in early 2025. And just to give you a visual of what a trillion is, right? So $100 bill, right, is right here. And if you stack it a few together, you'll have 10K. Stack this 10K, you get a million, then 100 million, and then a billion. A billion is still, you can still look at it and kind of comprehend it, right? But then a trillion is simply put too much to comprehend. You'll have to stack two of these billions on top of each other and then make a long line of them, right? It's absolutely insane. And we're talking trillions, folks, trillions. And at the core of this problem are the bankers. They are always at the core, adding leverage, adding fuel to the fire. Now the shell game and how they hide the debt. So the problem, big tech needs to build data centers, and I'm sure you've heard of it, is the big strategy of the US of A, right? Everyone is talking about it and it's happening everywhere, even in the Middle East, China, you name it. But doesn't want massive debt on their balance sheet because it ruins their credit rating. So they want these assets and they need to borrow money, but they don't want to ruin their credit rating. So what's the solution? A special purpose vehicle, right? Also an SPV. So the analogy, it's like an apartment building, a fake company props up to build a data center. So they just create this company, right? And it borrows the money to build this data center, and then the company that actually wants this data center, aka Meta, then becomes a tenant, right? So this is all the financial engineering that is happening, right? And this happens all the time. They have huge rooms full of accountants and lawyers, and they're conjuring up these schemes to benefit the company the most, best as possible. And these lawyers and accountants are being paid millions upon millions of dollars. It's usually, you'll see like quote unquote consultants and whatever else. And these companies really make a lot of money, and they sit there. And, I even consider corporate law because these guys really make millions upon millions of dollars, but it's boring and soul crushing. But that's what they do, right? All this financial engineering. And in fact, in the article, you see him mentioning an example of an actual data center, right? So the example shown here is Meta's 30 billion Hyperion data center in Louisiana. And I don't know if it actually is going to look like this or if it looks like this, but this is the image that I could find. Blue Owl owns the majority of the SPV, right? And the debt is held by the SPV, keeping Meta's hands, quote unquote, clean. And investors are told it's bulletproof because Meta is the tenant, right? So they kind of distance themselves from this risk. So when you think about the modern economy, it is all about risk, right? And then pushing it away to somebody else. Okay, think about the financial crisis. What happened? The banks borrowed a lot of money to a lot of people, right? Even people that were not credit worthy. They knew this, and then let's say they borrowed $1 billion or 2 billion, and then they sold it to unsuspected people for 1 billion and told them, hey, you're gonna make another billion in the next 30 years, right? And so they pushed these to funds and whoever was willing to take this garbage. And this is how not only banks operate, but banks have motivated and created a system where this is essentially how everybody operates. Everybody is trying to push the risk to someone else and not keep the risk. But the issue is that it's just artificial. It's a temporary push of the risk to someone else. So the ticking time bomb, the mismatch, the duration mismatch. So this is the technical term for funding a lemonade stand with a 30-year mortgage, right? So a lemonade stand is probably not going to last 30 years. So this debt is bad debt, right? So the loan investors are funding these buildings like they are long-term infrastructure, right? So they're asking investors, hey, give us $1 billion, okay? But these data centers are not gonna last 20, 30 years. The reality is that the guts of the building, aka the NVIDIA GPUs, what it's all about, wear out in 2 years running AI models 24/7. Now, of course, NVIDIA has tried to push back, but keep in mind, these people, they're gonna push back because this is their business. They're not gonna say, yeah, it doesn't make sense, you're gonna get wrecked in the long term. They're not gonna say that. They have to push this dream, right? And so what happens if a company gets $1 billion from investors? It spends this $1 billion buying GPUs, right? But then these GPUs then after a couple of years are only worth, let's say, 300 million or less, right? Because think about it this way, GPUs keep changing because there's currently a war between the USA and China, right? These two countries are trying to win the AI race, and China is now in a race trying to build its own chip manufacturing ecosystem. And obviously, the existing ecosystem realizes this and does not want to stand still and tries to move forward. So there's always going to be new chips, etc., right? So what happens to the investors when they come back and they realize, oh, that $1 billion I gave you, you bought something that is a depreciating asset, now it's only worth 300 million, and you only generated 100 million of revenue or whatever. So you made 100 million, and the value of the asset is only 300 million. And so now there's this $600 million hole, not even adjusting for inflation. Okay, what's going to happen? And keep in mind, they need to keep borrowing money from investors, right? This thing, it's not as if they borrow 1 billion and they're set for life. No, they have to keep borrowing. So how are they going to keep being able to keep borrowing? So that's the bomb that's coming, right? They won't be able to keep borrowing money because they won't be able to justify it. So this is the bomb that's coming, right? It smells bogus. Doesn't smell real to me. So here is the quote unquote fraud. And again, it's the article claiming it, not me. Don't come for me. So AI firms are extending the depreciation schedule, right? So they're saying, no. Don't worry. It's not 2 years. It's not 3 years. It's far longer than that. Claiming chips will last longer than they actually do to make revenue look better. I mean, these chips are running 24/7. So if they weren't running 24/7, then you can argue, okay, maybe they can last longer because such and such. But these things are going to be ran through real quick, right? The risk when the chips die in 24 months. Again, this article is very strict about 24 months. Maybe you can extend it a little bit. Maybe you can do this and that, but they're going to die and they're going to be outdated relatively quickly. You cannot have outdated stuff. You need to have cutting edge stuff because this AI race it keeps heating up, right? You are left with a hollowed out building and 18 years left on the loan. This creates stranded assets, right? So there's going to be a whole bunch of bad debt, right? Just like the financial crisis that happened last time, banks lend out this debt and then they're probably pushing this out. I didn't check. Maybe I should check that for a future video. Definitely willing to do that if you guys are interested. But my guess, because this is what banks always do, they lend out this money. They lend out $1 billion for such and such company to build out data centers. And my bet is that they pushed this debt out, sold it to someone else for like 800 million or whatever, right? Because then they tell the person, hey, you're gonna make 200 million in the next decade or two because they're gonna be paying you out money. But in reality, this money ain't coming. Okay, you're holding a bag right now. That's what I think is really happening. And this is a visual representation of what they're talking about, especially GPU providers, debt providers, tenants, which is then, in this case, Meta or whatever. And then this is the special vehicle, right? And so they're all just pushing this risk over to this thing. And so when this thing goes bust, it ain't got nothing to do with Meta. It ain't got nothing to do with these guys are going to get wrecked. But these guys are going to be fine. So, and by debt providers are going to get wrecked, I'm talking about whoever bought this debt from the private banks. They're going to get wrecked. But hey, that's, an issue for somebody else. And now we move on to the next thing, right? The Ouroboros, the circular financing that we are all so familiar with. Companies are investing in their own customers to fake growth. We've all seen this graph, right? We've all seen this nonsense right here. Nvidia gives money to startup. Startup uses money to buy Nvidia chips, and Nvidia books it as revenue, right? We've seen this disaster. The cloud subsidy, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, etc., make money on cloud computing. They use that profit to subsidize their AI models, right? The AI losses. So it just keeps on going and going and going, round tripping back and forth. But as it moves along, because it shows up as revenue and profit or whatever, they can just keep rolling it up, at least for the short while. The quote, everyone is financing the expansion of everyone else. Now the deficit, the AI industry needs $2 trillion in annual revenue by 2030. Again, even if you have this number, it's still really bad just to break even on current spending. Currently, that revenue does not exist. OpenAI alone lost $11.5 billion in one quarter. And OpenAI is very proudly saying, we don't mind burning through a bunch of money as long as we produce value. Well, we'll have to see. And using OpenAI as an example is not just random. I mean, this is, adding up all AI revenue, not profit, just revenue. And OpenAI, Anthropic, and 16 other AI native startups are cumulatively generating $18.5 billion in annualized revenue, with the top two firms capturing 88% of that amount. So if you see here, OpenAI is the, I guess you could say pink or red or whatever, and it's simply put the overwhelming majority, and they're not even making any money. And we're talking billions, whilst we should be talking trillions, because that's coming very soon in 2030, assuming they can't borrow more money, assuming the AI winter comes, because it could happen, right? That the AI winter comes and then there'll be no more money to be borrowed, and that's when companies go bust, right? So the contagion is explaining why you should care. This isn't just rich people losing money. Banks have lent $300 billion to these private credit firms, and who knows what the real number is, once this thing pops. But private equity are trying to push these risk assets into worker 401k, and it's really already there, right? So most likely, like what I mentioned, the banks, what they do is they take debt and then they push it to someone else, right? And they don't, and the problem is initially it is good debt, right? Initially they, find great people with great credit, but then after a while you run out of these good people, and so the quality of this debt just keeps going down and down and down until you're dealing with straight junk, because it's just a monster that needs to be kept, that they keep feeding, right? Because think about this, they borrow $1 billion and then they sell this thing for, $2 billion usually, because the interest that they're going to get on this, let's say, is whatever. And in the end, assuming the person who borrowed this money will pay $3 billion, right, to whoever owns this debt, they actually sell this debt for $2 billion. They say, hey, you're going to make another $1 billion later on. But then the banks makes $1 billion immediately. So this is very lucrative for banks and all these other institutions who have learned from the banks to do this. And so, but then it becomes toxic relatively quickly. Now, considering that this is pretty obvious, right? I'm not some extreme genius that sees something that nobody else is seeing. Everybody's seeing this. It's open, it's public. So why aren't they stopping it? And the reason I think it's not stopping is because of this war between these two powers, right? They know whoever gives up first will lose. Whoever controls AI in the future will win the future, right? And so that's why they can't stop. They have to keep going. With that being said, definitely remain safe. And even in the aftermath, AI is real. There is real value. So whoever has the cash during the crash will probably win, and whoever doesn't will get wrecked. With that being said, stay safe. I want to give a special shout out to the Patreons. Salute, soldier.